Okay, Lynn is a poet. She's written a lot of poems, and she would just like to share with you hundreds and hundreds.
I've been doing the course. I've been living the course, and the course. I've been living the course. I'm in a totally different way, and I've been writing poetry since 1964. But the end of 2016 and 2017, and now I've been writing. I've been writing differently, and John likes my poetry, and
we often have her in Miracles Magazine.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted to share. The past 2 days, I wrote 2 poems. I thought people might be interested. Reflection. Although always sensitive to a strength not mine, a hand that steadied my hazy walk. Experience gave me many poems. Threads of light showed me itself. My flesh and I are in agreement, as I am in now. And
go ahead.
Should I read the other one?
Yeah, go ahead.
What's so funny is that usually when I come here and John talks, I usually wrote a poem about it. I already wrote a poem about it the day before. This happened a few times. And this reminds me of what John's talking about. I named it Aging Gratitude. Flesh has served my lessons well. I recall all impact of decisions, not one separate, but most forgotten. As in pain, music stayed. Mind contained within 5 senses. Incredible, yet fragile body. Poetry swam to deepen breath. Radiant light in and exhaled. Stories of time prepped for now to be.
Thanks, Lynn. Very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, are there any, I always like to ask when we come back from a break, if there's any dialogue questions anybody has. If not, I will just continue. Guy, I see you opening your mouth, so you got to have the mic.
So when we come into this world, in this body, does the ego also come in at the same time?
That's a good question. I guess you have to say yes, but it's in very undeveloped form. So it's like we're between the worlds, so to speak. But it's developing, and it will come. Especially, with the first cry coming out of the womb, in the first. But there's that relative innocence. Like Ken Wapnick always would say, yes, that there is an ego that's there, and from the get-go. The question is how we develop that ego, and which direction it goes in terms of how malevolent it can become, or whether we can there's something that keeps it under control. Most people cannot keep it under control in the sense of they learn how to be civilized and live in the world and obey the world's laws. But underneath it could be a lot of other stuff going on. And especially if you have a hard life, like my friend Bob Durst, who mother committed suicide at the age of 7, and it seems to have crashed and burned him for the rest of his life. Then there's a lot to deal with. We've all got a lot to deal with. I mean, it's not easy to overcome this thing simply because we don't realize the tenacious hold it has. It is really tenacious. That's why it takes a lot to break it. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about studying mystical experiences is that because mystical experiences are usually well, they are, some kind of breakdown in the ego's structure, which then permits what the Course calls vision. We talked about perception earlier, so there's a distinction between vision and perception. So vision could be a very simple thing like just seeing in nature the beauty or music or something. More often it happens with some sort of crash and burn experience that really wakes us up, because then when life fails completely, and there's got to be another way. Folks that go to AA, for example, would say that something happened somewhere along the way that they realize they just, what's the first step? You got to admit to yourself, to God, and to one other person, I guess it is, that life is unmanageable the way it's been, and you got to start doing things differently. That's a mystical experience too. But then the unwinding of that ego, that's, we may take a lifetime, or as with John Mark Stroud, it might happen pretty quick, and then you're kind of cruising in a nice way from that time on.
I mean, even the awareness, this discussion that we're having of the ego.
Yeah.
It's
what?
It's not much discussed. It's more.
Oh, well, no.
It's more.
Sure.
Politics of the world.
Right. That's why you got to keep that in front.
Sorry.
Okay. That's why we're doing this. That's why this is a class. We talk about a class. So it's a class on learning something that we already know, but it's about exposing the ego, so to speak, inside ourselves, so that we can then look at it and realize what a tenacious hold it has on us, and what we as individuals need to do to let it go, which is probably something really very simple, like literally letting it go. By literally letting it go, I mean, for example, not being annoyed, not being perturbed, being patient, just little ways that we begin to practice changing our minds so that there's less insanity. It's not that we're no longer insane, but the thing is to watch ourselves all the time, watch our dialogues, watch our relationships, what's going on, especially in our immediate relationships, our closest relationships, but all relationships. But the places where the most danger where we could get into trouble more readily, at work or at home. Right? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay, I got another section I'm going to look at here. And I'm going to skip a whole bunch of slides to get to it. If we have time, we maybe come back to some of those, but I'm going to jump up to the laws of the universe. So, this is from chapter 5 in the Course. It says, the idea of the Holy Spirit shares the properties of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe. Now, this is interesting because at one point it says, the laws of happiness were made for you, but not by you. So there are certain basic laws. A law is something which, if we follow that law, we will get what we're looking for. In other words, we could use besides law would be principles. There are certain basic principles which describe how the mind works. But so there are basic principles that describe how we go insane, and there are other principles that describe how we come out of insanity. Right? How we begin to learn how to come out of our insanity. Right? And that's what the Course is. That's what the Course consists of. 365 workbook lessons. It's a slow process, and it, of course, says, be glad it's slow. There's one point at which it says, fear not, you will be hurled into reality. Time is kind. If you use it on behalf of reality, it'll keep gentle pace with your transition. So it's nice when it kind of keeps gentle pace. So Lynn is talking about how she slowly wakes up out of a former level of insanity where writing poems about suicide, now she writes about poems about love. I mean, if I can make that big jump like that, I mean, that's a huge difference that takes place over time. But the Course facilitated that process for her, and something like that can facilitate just studying it. This is here to study, okay? That's why this is a classroom. So let me read this. The idea of the Holy Spirit shares the property of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe of which it is a part. It is strengthened by being given away. Now that's a double law. By a double law, I mean it's strengthened by being given away. As we take away, so we do we deprive ourselves. So that's the opposite of it. So the Course says the most basic law there is in the universe is the law of cause and effect. What goes around comes around. And that has both a negative and a positive dimension to it. So in a negative sense, I said earlier today, one of the things that the Course says is you can't hurt somebody else without hurting yourself. So the moment I hurt somebody else, I'm actually hurting myself. There's two dimensions to that. One of the dimensions is that I'm hurting myself because I feel guilty. Even though I may say I don't feel guilty, even though I may bury the guilt down, I do nevertheless feel guilty because I know that I've done something against the whole. Whenever you do something against the whole, by the whole I mean the one mind, then I know that, and I feel that, and I feel guilty for that, and I also lock that into myself. When I say I lock it into myself, I probably don't talk about it with anybody else. It's something I can't share. And seeing how it's something I can't share, I feel isolated and separated and segregated, and that's a really pretty, we said earlier today that the whole process is one of sharing, that our greatest joy comes in sharing. So I can't be isolating myself and also sharing at the same time. So that's how it works in a kind of a negative way. In the positive way, it is, we all know they'll say, as you give, so do you receive, and the more we give, the more we receive. And what we're talking about here isn't necessarily anything. It's not money necessarily. Could be money. Could be money. Could be money if that was what somebody needed and you had the ability to facilitate by giving them some money. That would help them. More likely in the first place, it's just giving our attention, or giving our time, or giving our love. And then that's going to be appreciated. You remember Jesus in the Gospels has this whole line about, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. I was sick and you cared for me, etc., whatever the conditions were. And you did this. And because you did this, you did it for the whole. You did this for yourself. There's no way you cannot be helpful to somebody else and help yourself, just as there's no way you can hurt somebody else and not hurt yourself. So it's really good that I understand that basic principle. Right? Okay, let's go on a little bit more. So the laws of the universe do not permit contradiction. What holds for God holds for you. If you believe you are absent from God, you will believe that He is absent from you. Now that's a very important point. God is never absent. God is always there. God is always, the Holy Spirit, the voice of the Holy Spirit is always talking to you. It's always giving you direction and instruction. There's never a time that that's not true. So if we say, I don't hear it, it's only because we're not listening, because we think therefore that we can't hear. And the truth of the matter is that you could. Again, to go to John Mark Stroud, I keep using him as an illustration because I re-listened to one of his YouTube presentations recently. And part of what, as he began to do this, he began to become aware that of the voice, that there was another voice. The problem is that the ego's voice is so loud, and so the Course uses the word shrieks. I mean, sometimes it is shrieking, and when it's shrieking, then we're really mad, and then we're really crazy, and then we don't. It seems at that point, at least, we got no chance of getting out of the insanity, unless something stops, unless something stops us. That literally, in certain institutional situations, for example, somebody may be put into solitary confinement, literally, until they stop their acting out. Eventually, they'll stop. Eventually, the insanity will stop. But you can't battle them. You can't fight them. There's nothing you can do against it that's just going to keep the battle going. So something has to happen to completely stop the mind before you can come back to sobriety, I guess we could say, right? Something got to bring us back to sobriety. And something brings us back to sobriety, then we can... It's a good idea when a couple, for example, have a dispute or a fight that I learned this from my daughter when she was a teenager. When something would start to happen and I could see that this was going to go wrong, I would leave. I would literally leave the room and go to my office, which would give her a chance to cool down, which would give me a chance to cool down, to stop rehearsing. You know how you rehearse the thing in your head? You know, that you rehearse what you're going to say in your head. Amy Spalding, who used to come here quite a bit, was talking once about how she had an argument with her father, and 2 or 3 days later, she said she was coming out of the bathroom, and he was in the hallway, and he says, "And another thing." This is days later, but that means that it's still caught in his mind, this insane thing, and he's been rehearsing it. He's been going over it. I mean, that is really insane. Did you ever do that? Of course you've done it. Everybody's done it, You get alone in your car and you start rehearsing what you're going to say when you get in front of somebody, and you're laughing because it's true, right? Yes, of course. You've done that. You know what everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about. But so what's really helpful at that point is to recognize I'm insane right now. I'm the one who's insane right now. And seeing how I'm the one that's insane right now, I'm going to have to just let this sit for a while, and then I can come back to it. That's why it's really a good idea, let's say with a couple, that you may literally separate for a little bit. I mean, go to a different part of the house or something, and then you come back later on, and one will say, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry too." Okay, now we're back to a point where we can communicate, because this is all about. It's all about healing, and it's all about healing our relationships. Let's talk about this just a little bit more. The Course says that first of all, the reason we're here is to heal. Every one of us, the reason we're here is to heal a broken mind. The mind is broken insofar as it doesn't see itself as being a part of God. So it's not a part of wholeness. If we thought with the same mind that it like the mind of God, then everything would be perfect. I mean, literally perfect. And that's what the Course says. It would literally be perfect, and everything would work out fine for you. And so we don't do that, but we can begin to practice the principles that will facilitate our doing that in the right way. Right? First step is that I see that I'm insane. So we're here to learn. The basic way that we learn is through, and it's what we're doing right now, is through communication. This is a school. I think I said last time we were here, it's a school, it's a hospital, it's a rehabilitation center. That's what this is. And that's what's in it. Ebert called it a hoax, right? Well, it's a hoax, but we have to learn that it is a hoax, and that we don't want to play. You don't want to play into the insanity. If I'm playing into the insanity, I'm just being insane. So when you watch the news, you either don't watch it. One of the fellows in our class once said that his father yelled at the television when literally screams at it when he watches it. So if you're up to screaming at it, stop watching it, you know. Or you do it completely dispassionately. You just say, well, that's the world, and that's what's going on, and it's crazy, but I don't have to start making comments about it and go crazy myself just because the world is crazy. You know? Leave the world alone, is what the Course in Miracles is saying. Just let it be what it is. It has always been insane. It will always be insane because the ego is in charge. And the ego rules, and the ego always has ruled. Now, while the ego always has ruled, the ego doesn't have to rule your mind. It doesn't have to rule my mind. But I am the trainer, the teacher, and I'm the student all at the same time. And I'm learning how to, the Course says, I'm literally learning how to think. This is a course in mind training. I'm learning how to train my mind to start thinking in ways that it's going to enable me to be in alignment with the laws of the universe, which will then get me home. That's it. We all just want to be home. Another way you could talk about home, another word we could use would be peace. I just want to be peaceful. We think heaven is a place of peace, right? So it's just this peaceful state. It's perfectly possible to reach this peaceful state. It may take a lot of, well, if I'm a Zen Buddhist, meditation. The Course is not talking about, it doesn't say there's nothing wrong with meditation. In fact, very often, at the end of one of the workbook lessons, it'll say, now be quiet. You know, now be quiet. I mean, just let this thought sink in, right? Let it take, right? But then also, as we were talking during the break, it involves practice. It involves putting it into practice consistently and becoming aware of when I'm not putting it into practice. So let me go on with this a little bit more here. So I'm going to repeat this I just did. If you believe you are absent from God, you will believe that He is absent from you. He's not absent from you. The sane mind, is another way we could talk about God, is always there. It's always available. And I can be sane just as even with more facility than being insane. Infinity is meaningless without you, and you are meaningless without God. The reason you're meaningless without God is because without God, all you've got is a fantasy land. I'll have a slide about that in a moment. It really is a fantasy land. That's what's going on. You're literally dreaming your life away. And a lot of lives get dreamed away. There is no end to God and His Son, for we are the universe. That's last sentences. That's all from the Course. We are the universe. And notice that R is, you can't help but being a part of God. God can't help but that you're part of Him. Okay, so ego actually is, let's read. The more the knowledge, lesser the ego. Lesser the knowledge, more the ego. Okay. Knowledge, we've said, is this thing which is the opposite of perception, which is judgmental. So we're into there's a state of knowing where there's no judgment. What there is beingness. Being is a state in which the mind is in communication with everything that is. Isn't that nice? That's a direct quote from the Course. Being is a state in which the mind is in communication with all that there is. So it's just this communication. It's a very beautiful kind of communication. Right? And the next one. So knowledge literally equals heaven. It's knowing. And heaven is the pre-separated world of God. It is a unified creation, exclusive of the world of perception. Exclusive. So perception, keep in course terms, always is talking about it in terms of the ego. Well, let me rephrase that. Almost always. There's an exception. The exception is something the course calls true perception. True perception would be the same though as knowledge. We're now getting back to knowing God. And you probably know there's a famous, it's a well-known clip, you can watch it on YouTube, where Carl Jung in 1961, which is the year he died, is being interviewed on the BBC in London, and the interviewer asks him, Dr. Jung, do you believe in God? And he does this pause, and then he says, no, I know. I know. I know God. There's a difference between believing is something that's very weak. Belief is like a concept that can be changed, but this is not something that can be changed. It's a knowing, right? And everybody knows this already. You may think that you don't know it, but then when you know it, you recognize that you always have known this. You cannot lose God. You cannot lose love. You can temporarily, but time isn't real either. Time is a temporal thing. We can temporarily put it out of our minds. But the nice thing is to be able to get back there and then sustain the awareness. Sustained awareness of the truth of God. It's a wholly different state. That's where we all want to be in the long run, and not lose it. So I want to be clear, if I am losing it, then I can get it back. Because you had it once, you can get it back. That's the good news. Good news is you've had it before, it's actually underneath everything that you're thinking, and you can recapture it. So perception is a dualistic world of form. So by that it means like self and other, myself and the outside, me against the world, other bodies and other things. One of the things that happens in a mystical experience is the loss of subject-object. And that's what happens, if you think about it, probably the primary way that we know that is in like in a romantic relationship when you're falling in love. Right? And that you so identify with the beloved that you become the beloved, not physically, not literally, but on the level of mind, right? So you just want to give to the beloved. And that's all you want to do. You just want to give. It's automatic. There's no reason for selfishness. That's the last thing you would want to do. Love always wants to give. It couldn't possibly be selfish. If it's selfish, it's not love. So heaven is the only place that we can be and also know eternity. And by the way, you don't have to die to get this. You don't have to die to know what heaven is. Heaven is a state of mind. Of course, heaven is not a place. This is very important. It's not a place or condition. It's merely an awareness of perfect oneness. See that phrase, oneness, again? It keeps coming up. An awareness of perfect oneness. That's all that there is. In other words, there's no separation, there's no division. This is the world of division and separation. But it doesn't have to be. In my mind, it doesn't have to be. And anybody can get their mind back. So, the Course would say, laugh at your fears and replace them with peace, for fear lies not in reality, but in the mind of children who don't understand reality. And I love this picture. I'm sure you're familiar with Einstein, because Einstein was a mystic, a true mystic. He said, I want to know, and this is what a mystic would say, what he was after, he says, I want to know how the mind of God works. right? I mean, that was the big thing, to know how the mind of God works. And then to be a part of that mind by knowing it, by understanding it. And he did it through mathematics. I mean, you're doing through a deep dive into understanding the fabric, so to speak, of the universe. Right? What's nice about him thinking he was in a taxi cab when this was taken, and somebody's shooting pictures at him, a photographer, and he just turns and looks out the taxi cab window and does this because he's like saying, so much with you and your society and your world and your publicity, and this one for sure got into the newspapers because he's just kind of making fun of the whole thing. It's just a silly game that he was not interested in being famous. It wasn't because he was after fame. It's one thing if you're after fame. It's another thing if it kind of falls on you and you weren't looking for it. It's because you were pursuing your goal in life to know the mind of God, and you wind up discovering a basic secret of the universe. My God. Yeah. So, of course, it says, seek not yourself in symbols. There can be no concept that can stand for what you are. So if I said in the past, there's no doctors or reverends or captains or lieutenants or whatever in heaven. Okay? So, of course, the love says you have to forgive yourself. It uses that phrase quite a few times. You have to forgive yourself for not being able to make it on your own because you have realized the impossibility of doing so. Nobody can make it on their own. It's impossible. We are in a totally, it's not dependent, well, it's dependent in a sense, but connected relationship. We have to, in the Course, God is identified as Father. All of us are identified as children or as sons. Therefore, we have this direct connection. That's the way symbolically it's being expressed, right? And we will continue to be lonely until we can reconnect. Forgive yourself your madness. Or again, recognize you are mad. And forget all senseless journeys and all goalless aims. They have no meaning. You cannot escape from what you are by trying to find yourself in the world. And we may be trying to find ourselves in the world, and that's not working. For God is merciful and did not let his Son abandon him. For what he is, be thankful. For in that is your escape from madness and from death. Nowhere but where he is can you be found. Ultimately speaking, even if you think this is not what you're about, everybody here is searching for God. Some people more actively so than others. Some people know that this is what it's all about, and that that's what they have to do. We call them seekers, right? But we're all seekers. Whether you recognize it or not, you may be seeking in the wrong place, and eventually you will find out that it's the wrong place, which is a really good thing, because now you can turn around and look where it is and not where it's not. It's very good to know where where it's not. So now you can find out where it is. Okay? Come on. Okay, this is from A Course of Love. You had to forgive yourself for being what you are, a being who exists only in relationship. Is this the one I did before? You have to forgive all others for being as you are. They too cannot be separate, no matter how hard they try. We all can try, and we all do try. We don't look. We like to drown ourselves in some, alcohol or something that takes us away. Forgive them, forgive yourself, forgive God. Then you will be ready to begin learning just how different it really is to live in the reality of relationship. So this is the third time on one of these slides we've looked at today that's talked about relationship. So it's all about relationship. It's all about loving. It's all about learning how to be lovers for each other, which means everyone, right? Don't take the word lover too literally there. It has a bigger meaning, right? Or it ought to be friends, if you want to put it in a simpler term, real friends. I keep talking, and anybody want to interject this way, do so. Right? Lynn, you got a mic. You got to have a mic. Billy's got to pass it down. It's on its way to you. Here comes Mike.
Thank you. The power of forgiveness is incredible. It's incredible. I found that when I forgave, I was able to forgive myself.
Exactly. You can't forgive without forgiving yourself.
That's the same thing. What you do with others, you do to yourself.
Right.
It's amazing.
Because there's literally is no problem out there unless you perceive a problem. And if you perceive a problem, then you've got a problem, but you're the one that's got the problem. So forgiving yourself for is for perceiving the problem, for thinking that there was a problem there in the first place. Now you realize that there's not, that you created that. You made it real. It doesn't make any difference what it is. That's why all forgiveness is self-forgiveness. If you really forgive, if you really, really, really do it, an interesting thing will happen. You will go, oh my God, I'm the one who's forgiven. I'm the one who's forgiven. Because it never did have anything to do with the other. I made that up. I saw a problem. I created a problem where there was no problem. Ken worked very hard in helping me understand that in one particular relationship. And once I got it, it was like, whoa. I just really, whoa. It's like, I remember even stopping and saying to Ken at the time, oh God, to think that was inside me. To think that was inside me. All right?
I just want to say, I love what Khalil Gibran wrote. The deeper sorrow carves in you, the more joy you can contain.
Mm.
And according to the Course, the Holy Spirit changes everything to make it holy. And I could see how some things led to other things,
Mm-hmm.
to where I am now, which
Sure.
I'm totally grateful.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's do another slide or two, and then we're going to talk a little bit, dialogue, and then we'll have a meditation. Again from the Course, the ego may see some good, but never only good. Of course, the ego sees good. It likes things, or pretty things, it identifies the positive stuff that's out there. This is why its perceptions are so variable. It does not reject goodness entirely, for that you could not accept, but it always adds something that is not real to the real, thus confusing illusion and reality. For perception cannot be partly true. If you believe in truth and illusion, you cannot tell which is true. So there's no illusion. There's nothing to be caught in within the context of an illusion. If when you see purely, you love everything. There's nothing that is not loved. Remember the story of our Chinese friend Zhao Weng, who in her mystical experience looks at dog poo and sees light coming out of it. And as one of the workbook lessons, I think it's 11, very, very early lesson says, God is in everything I see because God is in my mind. So there's nothing from that standpoint that you couldn't even use the word disgusting. There wouldn't be anything disgusting. Only, that's a very judgmental thing to say, isn't it? That something is disgusting, right? All right. Let me just see this. I'll do this one, and this is going to be my last slide, okay? Having separated from our Creator, we think it's possible to create our own world. It's not possible. it is conceivable only within a dream or an illusion, which is why the whole world is an illusion. So what we do is we create Disneyland, or we create Jeffland or Guyland or Linland or Yaskoland or Christianland or whatever the land it is, that we then think that we live in, but that's it's always mythology, right? I'm going to stop. Anybody got any dialoguing? Okay. I want to do a meditation with you. So this is called There's Nothing My Holiness Cannot Do. It's one of the workbook lessons. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it. And as I like to do this, there'll be a few times I'm going to say with me. And then you say with me, there's nothing my holiness cannot do. Okay, so short paragraph. And, okay. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. Your holiness reverses all the laws of the world. It is beyond every restriction of time, space, distance, and limit of any kind. Your holiness is totally unlimited in its power because it establishes you as a son of God, at one with the mind of His Creator. Say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Through your holiness, the power of God is made manifest. Through your holiness, the power of God is made available. And there is nothing the power of God cannot do. Your holiness can remove all pain, can end all sorrow, and can solve all problems. Say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. If you are holy, so is everything God created. You are holy because all things He created are holy, and all things He created are holy because you are. Say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Search your mind for any sense of loss or unhappiness of any kind as you see it. Try to make as little distinction as possible between a situation that's difficult for you and one that is difficult for someone else. Identify this specifically and also the names of the person concerned. Take a few seconds to do that. Search your mind for any sense of loss or unhappiness. Identify the situation. Name the person concerned. Then say to yourself, in the situation involving, think of the situation in which I see myself. Say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. And now again, think of someone else in a situation involving whoever. Say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. There is nothing your holiness cannot do because the power of God lies in you. The purpose of this exercise is to begin to instill in you a sense that you have a dominion over all things because of what you are. And now, one last time, say with me, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Thank you. And we like to end with the Lord's Prayer from the Course in Miracles, which is not the Lord's Prayer that from tradition, but from it's called the Lord's Prayer from the Course because it doesn't say this in the Course. I mean, it says this in the Course, but it doesn't say it's the Lord's Prayer. This is the last paragraph on page 350 in the Course. And we'll all read this together. pause at every comma and stop completely for a second at every period. Okay? Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. Can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the mind, which you created and which you love. Amen. Thank you. So in March, we're back to the second Sunday, and it's March 11th, I think it is, and I hope to see some of you back then. Enjoy your time, your trip home. Thank you.